that blows my mind. 56
Mhm.
million hits.
Mhm.
And I think it also, I think it really underscores this idea that there's a lot of fear
Yeah.
and trepidation around getting older, and yet
Yeah.
it's inevitable.
And I think that sense of invisibility is not just our fear. Of course, that's part of it, but it's how our culture defines, well, two things: being female and getting older, and then just getting older. So I think most of us know what sexism is all about and probably have experienced it, especially if you're 50 plus. Um, that is still ongoing. It always will be. And what's interesting is that in our country, which is not unlike other countries, we define value differently for women than we do for men. And Pew Research in 2017 did a study and wanted to look at how people valued men and women, if it was different. And they found that women were primarily valued for their appearance, and men for their character and for their accomplishments, basically. So boy, if that's how you're valued, and you hit about 50, about that menopausal period, and also the research says our faces start showing age faster than men's do. You
Yeah,
hit that
yeah.
point, you know so what does that say about your value? Your value starts feeling like, okay, nobody sees me anymore because I'm not this young, attractive woman in the same way. And then the other thing, of course, which is really big, is age discrimination or stereotyping based on age, and we all can experience that. But you're combining it's gendered ageism, the sexism, and then ageism, where we stereotype people because we assume, hey, you can't learn anything new, you're
Right,
slower,
right,
you're
right.
not desirable. And so, okay, all of a sudden you start noticing, not only are you getting these messages everywhere, but you start noticing that people really don't look at you. You can't get help, when you're
Ah,
trying to buy something. And so you start seeing this shift and you think, what in the world is going on?
yeah, it's amazing to me because I feel like these topics are all around me right now. In chatting with you and reading and rereading your very powerful book, I've started to notice at deeper levels the women who have decided to live their lives and the women who sort of um, believe that their value is diminished. And I think one of the things that's so troubling to me is, and you point this out, or I wouldn't be able to bring it up, is just the stories that
Mhm.
we tell ourselves and the stories, as you bring up in the book, that society tells us, but the stories our families tell us that we grow up with,
Mhm. Mhm.
around getting older. And again, as you said, it's women getting older, it's not men. So
Although I do hear, sometimes I'll read something or I'll hear something from another man who talks about feeling invisible. It's just not as prevalent and probably not as consistent. It's really widespread, and women are very, very aware of it after a point of time. Sometimes they don't know why they feel that way, but they
yeah,
know something's shifted, something's changed. And I can say that the advertising industry, the cosmetic
right.
industry that advertises, that's a $14 billion industry in the United States. And so, if you want to feel like, okay, you're bombarded, they know that women are afraid of getting older. And so we've got these wonderful products that can save you from age. They're anti-aging. You don't have to age. They'll defy age for you. And then if that doesn't work, you can try peels. And if that doesn't work, why, there's cosmetic surgery. And I think it was in 2018, there were 122,000 facelifts. 90% were women.
Yeah.
90% were women, and so there's a lot of pressure on women to feel like somehow we have to be this different version of ourselves that we no longer are, and we shouldn't even want to be.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
wonderful. We have a lot of freedom when we get older. As one of my friends said, I love getting older because I am no longer bound by
mm,
these gendered definitions of who I have to be, sweet, smiling all the time. I
yeah.
get to explore who I am.
No, it's very powerful. It's really powerful. Wow. So Paula, I feel like in the, as we're getting older, and I told you that I recently experienced being ignored in a clothes store.
Mhm.
What can we do?
Well, I think first of all, and that's a that's a good question because you think, what's going on here?
Right.
I think we have to be aware of it. We really have to be aware of what's going on first and foremost, and why it's happening,
Mhm.
and then not allow ourselves to, number one, internalize it and start saying, "Oh, I just am getting old," because then we start developing that mindset of, "Oh, we're just falling apart." And actually, there's some really good research that shows if we start internalizing those messages,
Right.
then that becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And Becca Levy, who's really well known for this research, talks about how that mindset can actually shorten our lifespan by about 7.5 years, which is, that tells you how serious that is. So being aware of that negative view that we're
Mhm,
getting from our culture and from
mhm,
advertisers,
mhm.
if we put that on, if we wear that, if we accept that rather than reject it, we're hurting ourselves. We're hurting our life
Yeah.
potential. That would
Yeah.
be one, besides being aware of it, is to recognize it. And then there's some specific strategies, if that's what you want me to talk about, that we can do to just
I
kind of
do.
reclaim our power. But that,
No,
I don't know if
I
that's where you
do.
are.
I do. But I do want to say this. I think that it's more than we're being told stories. I
Mhm.
think most women alive today have already internalized all these stories.
Start internalizing at 4 years old, basically.
So it's really, I would think it's noticing the story and letting,
Yeah,
it's cleaning house
it is.
because,
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because in a way they're already there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, we can't, we have to recognize it is there
Yeah,
already, and then start becoming aware of it, and then
right.
start checking it and rejecting it. And that's our challenge, and it's not easy. I find for myself, looking at other women
Hmm.
who are older
Mhm.
has been a really powerful way to see myself as a powerful person, really.
Yeah,
And I think about, and we talked about this before, somebody like Susan B. Anthony
right.
was still speaking nationally right up till the end of her life at 86 years old. And and she was on a mission. I mean, she was a powerful woman, and
Hmm.
she's out there doing it. And people harassed her. They talked about she was this old maid and made fun of her. A good part of her life, not toward the end, but a good part of her life when she was out speaking. But she kept going, and she was powerful. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, another one,
Yeah,
on the bench at 87 years old, and
yeah,
she after her death had rock star status,
right, right.
and women love her. And so these other women are just such powerful role models for us, and we can recognize we have the same potential, each of us, to be whoever we want to be
Well,
rather than defined.
right. Well, I love how you are really changing the narrative.
We all can.
Your
Yeah, we
book,
all
but
are.
I mean,
Mm.
your book really, you point out so many of these aspects
Mm.
that we can begin to notice, to disown, to own.
Hmm.
Um, I know that we've talked before about not just famous mentors and role models, but also just people that people
Yeah.
that are in your life. And I remember you mentioned, was it Doris?
Doris, good memory. And by the way, this is cinnamon water. It's not my after 4 o'clock West Coast
Oh,
beverage.
it's not a rosé. I have tea in my
Oh, no.
thin cup.
This is cinnamon water.
Okay.
It's sweet, but it doesn't have sugar in it. But yeah, I met a woman, and I realized, and I was in my early 60s. I'm 71 now. And by the way, at this point in my life, I'm bragging about how old I am. I'm not trying to hide it anymore. I'm saying, hey, this is me. But when I was in my early 60s, I met a neighbor down by the, where we get our mail, and she was coming down a little incline in her walker. And I looked at her and I was polite and I thought, well, she's still breathing, be nice. And I had this big stereotype. She was at the time about 96 years old.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, I have nothing in common, but I'll be polite. And she invited me in. We became friends. And I realized this amazing woman named Doris got on the internet every morning so that she could learn something new.
Wow.
So anybody who has stereotypes about people at different ages not being comfortable with technology, she did that. She exercised every morning to stay in shape. She ate healthy. And she said, you've got to have a positive attitude about aging.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable woman. And then I thought, I want to be Doris someday. That's who I want to be. And it really helped me start changing how I was looking at aging. And I'm thinking, okay, if I make it that long, I want people to look at me and say, that's who I want to be. And I think one of the most thrilling things that had happened a couple years after that, I was out. I used to think I ran. Then I thought I jogged. I don't know what I do now, but I still move. And a young woman stopped me and she said, I see you out here doing this all the time, out here exercising, out here. She said I was running, which really cracked me up. And I'm thinking, you thought I was running? That's so cool. But she says, I want to be like you when I'm older. I thought that was the nicest thing anybody has ever said. Could we want to be anything more than to be somebody like Doris to somebody else?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I started a list of women mentors because you brought it up in the book. And it's fun to walk around the streets and in Central Park and notice the women who have really claimed their power. And I know you talk a lot about physical things we can do, mindset, mental things we can do. Can you share with us some of your recommendations?
Oh, sure. And I have a speech communication background, so I always, that's my go-to spot. But one of the things that we tend to do when we internalize something negative about getting older is that we physically will shrink up sometimes. Computers can do that too, but we can't become smaller, which means our voice doesn't project that well. We feel maybe inadequate. Other people are not paying attention to us. So we start shrinking, and we really need to do just the opposite and use our body to take up space, become bigger and project our voice. If I want to get attention in the store, for example, because I used to just kind of let it go until I realized, hey, wait a minute. By the way, do you know that women actually have a lot more control over the money that's spent in this country than anybody else does? Especially older women, but I will, and I recommend people do this. This is having presence, feet, hip distance apart. Yeah. And stand big, make yourself bigger. And then I use direct eye contact. If I want to get somebody's attention, I am there, I'm with you, I'm present, and that's part of getting that attention. Somebody speaks over me and I want to have a word, I'll have to hold my hand up. I have to be assertive about it and just say, just a minute, and then project that voice. Posture is another really big one. And I used an example in my book of a friend, her name is Nadigan, who used to, she's retired now, but she could walk into a room at work and she she looked like a queen. I mean, she just had this great posture. She filled the room with her presence. She would pause, take control of things, and she would project her voice, and she had everybody. People would listen to her. She didn't shrink, and that's a really big thing, And I think the other thing I would just add, there's a lot that I have in my book about different suggestions, but I've been caught off guard, and I'm in communication, right? And then I say really stupid things. But when people insult us and we
Yes.
become aware of it, it's really easy to just flash respond. And I'm had to learn, because a couple of times I responded in a way I didn't want to, but I have to learn to be intentional, and I've been working on that.
Mm.
And think about how I'm going to respond to a person who maybe makes an ageist remark or says something like, "Oh, sweetie, and speak real loudly, do you need some help with that?"
Mm. Mm.
And I've had that happen before, and I have to just breathe and say, for example, if I'm carrying something, well, I carried it up here. But I appreciate your help.
Right.
I
Right.
think I can get it out of here, but I have to just be very careful that I don't
Mhm.
reinforce a stereotype that they might already believe about me,
Wow.
cranky old woman, so I have to be a woman who has the maturity to use it as a teaching moment.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's a lot. It's a lot to change the narrative.
Mhm.
I know we talked about other physical things, and you mentioned not just jogging, but balance.
Oh, you want me to give my true confession
Yes,
story
I
here?
do.
Okay,
I
is it there
do.
too?
I
I've
do.
got a
It's
daughter.
important.
Yeah, I've got a daughter-in-law who's has a doctorate in physical therapy. When I hit 60, she says, "Now, Paula, what you really have to work on is your balance. Women, as they get older, boy, if you have a fall, it could be really bad." And I'm thinking, I was out jogging all the time. I'm thinking, yeah, other women really need to work on this. I'll tell those other women out there they should work on this. And then I had a fall while I was
Yeah.
out jogging, and I thought, how did that happen? And then a couple of weeks later, I had another one.
Oh.
And I thought, I hope nobody saw that. It was so embarrassing. And then I realized I had to start working on my balance.
Mhm.
And I can stand for quite a while on one foot or the other now, and I feel like, and I've got to keep working on it. I stop working on it, then I'm not as steady. It's so important.
But Paula, I think that this is really, it points out two key elements. And one is just that, and you've said this in your book and with me, but just this denial. Oh, well, that's not me. I'm different. That won't happen to me. No, no,
Yeah.
no. I'm fine.
Yes,
And
that's
I'm
me.
not
Yeah.
going to get, all this. And it now, when those voices come up, I just laugh because I'm like, are you kidding? But we talked about balance and exercises that you can do to build your balance and
Mhm.
yoga. But it's, as you pointed out, your bone mass, what did you say, after menopause, that
After menopause, we're going to get a little bit, our bones can get more fragile, but that can really mess us up. I knew somebody in my neighborhood who fell and she broke her pelvis. She fell again, she broke something else, and she has no mobility whatsoever, hardly at all. She's pretty much housebound. And yeah, we say we're not going to get older, nothing's going to happen to us, but we certainly, and it will, but we can do what we can to mitigate the damage, to take good care of ourselves.
Yeah, and one of the things that you did in the book, and I love this, is you not only give recommendations, things like lifting weights and creating, your own exercise plan, but I love this. You do a great job of pointing of setting up, like, is it a rubric?
It'd be like a rubric or an action plan,
An action
so
plan.
yeah, yeah, because we can come up with, say, oh, when I get older or when I retire,
Right.
I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to do all
Right.
these things. And the problem is, I mean, wishful thinking is not a plan, and you've
I,
got to have a plan.
right.
And so what Martha, I know you're talking about, and I've have several examples in my book where you can say, okay, I want to eat healthy. I'm healthy food. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, boy, now I have time. I'm going to take care of that.
Right.
Well, what does that look like, first of all? What are you talking about? How much?
Mhm.
And how are you going to measure it? How are you going to measure your success? Well, what if I have potato chips and pizza for lunch tomorrow?
Right.
Does that mean I've blown it and start all over again? Maybe your initial measurement is, okay, I'm defining healthy foods this way. I
Mhm.
am, ideally I would eat that way at least 6 days a week or 7 days a week.
Mhm.
But if I go off a little bit here, it's okay. I am still moving forward. I'm still moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's, I mean, just measuring, same way with weights. You might start out with 8-pound weights. You're doing it 10 minutes, 5 days a week or something, or you're doing it 5 minutes. I think I started out at 5 minutes, 5 days a week.
And what are
But
you doing now?
oh, I do 10-pound weights,
Okay.
and I probably do it 25 or 30 minutes a week, not at once, Martha.
Okay.
But I leave them near the television where I watch news in the evening, and so I can just really easily do it then. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting so strong. Well, not really, but if I fall, I'll be able to catch myself. I'll be able to
Yes.
help probably push myself back up.
I just feel like so many of these points are really important and that we can build new habits but at the same time creating small habits and as you said putting the weights so that you can watch the news, making it easy so that you actually can have success.
Mhm. Yeah, and just measuring that you're keeping on track. If you want to increase it, don't do it all at once. It's not an all or once thing. It is a plan that you're carrying out, and if you want, improve over time.
Yeah. Well, I love talking about the physical things, but one of the things that excited me probably more than anything was just talking about purpose and
Oh,
talking about defining your purpose and
mm,
defining your purpose at whatever age, but especially as you're getting older or maybe once you retire.
mhm,
And I feel like your conviction around your purpose is very inspiring to me.
mm,
And you laid out in the book, actually, I loved this because I think it's very easy to say, oh, draft a mission statement, draft a purpose. But you gave us a page of sample
mhm,
mission statements. And that really brought it down to earth for me, where I was like, oh, okay, so I can do this. And there's so many books Paula's recommended that I can read about mission and purpose. But can you just talk a little bit about how your mission has fueled you?
sure. Um, And I think it becomes even more important as we get older because we start thinking about legacy. Why am I here? What am I going to leave? And then we start thinking about, so what is my purpose? And I know in the blue zones, I think Dan Buettner talked about it's that thing that causes you to want to get up in the morning, if I'm quoting him right.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah,
Like,
and that can be to me a small p, a small purpose, like I'm a single parent of a 100-pound black lab right now. Okay.
okay.
Part of my purpose is I get up every morning and I take care of the dog. That's a small P.
Okay.
But it gets me going. But I have a big P purpose. And that is something that's part of who I've been, part of what I've done, part of what shaped me. And as I realized what that was, I could write it out in the sentence. For me, whether I'm teaching or I'm writing or I'm involved in something else, for me, encouraging other people to feel empowered to live their best lives at any age is what I'm about. It's what I've always been about. It wasn't something I came up with. I just had to go back and look at my history and put it into words. Having that mission statement is like a compass. if I forget, okay, and I'm recently, well, not so recently anymore, about 9.5 months ago, I became a widow. And you think, okay, I've spent a lot of my time taking care of my husband, being a caregiver for the last 3 years that he was alive. Now what? Well, my purpose has not changed. My purpose has not changed. It pushes me forward. I'm doing it in a different way, but I know my purpose. And Doris had a purpose. Any woman that you're going to meet and you say, that's who I want to be like, they're living with purpose.
I think it's so important. And I know a lot of people, when they leave the big job, they really struggle because
Yeah.
there's sort of a moment of, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
And doing that tough work of digging down to find out who you are and then to finding your purpose is a process.
It's a big process. And, if you're talking about post-career living, a lot of people in the retirement area, retirement coaching, will say, yeah, you probably want to think about 2 to 3 years before you actually leave your career. You're starting to do some planning, because it's not okay, now I'm here, now what?
Right.
It takes a lot of planning. And the old joke is most people spend more time planning a vacation than they do the rest of their lives. You're going to be a lot of people out of their career 20, maybe 30 years. And what tends to happen, the research says that after 2 years, because people don't tend to plan, they may, oh, this is so much freedom, I'm having so much fun. Then they get bored. About 2 years, boredom sets in. And what happens? What's the default? Well, a lot of people end up just watching TV hours and hours. That replaces the time in the office, or social media or something else. So if we do not take it seriously and really plan, not just the financial aspects, and for women, that's a lot more complicated, and it can be a bigger challenge, but the non-financial aspects, what's really important? Thinking about your purpose, what is my day going to look like? And if I have some bucket list things, how's that going to work out? What if life changes? Where do I want to head? What kind of impact do I want to have? What's important? And this I do feel really excited about. In the chapter I have about retirement or post-career planning, I'm kind of a assessment obsessed. I used to be an assessment researcher. So how do I do? But there's all kinds of assessments, self-assessments in that chapter. I did become a certified professional retirement coach. I've never coached anybody. I write about it and I speak about it, and I found it very helpful for myself. But I've shared what I would share with people if I were coaching them in that chapter.
No, it's a fantastic chapter. I mean, that chapter alone could be its own separate. I love these topics because it involves exploring your values, recognizing, or kind of reflecting on, what do you love? What do you love that you haven't done because you've been too busy working? And I loved the story that we talked about, that you're now playing the flute again after many, but that's an example, I think, of something that, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, that's fine. And I'm glad you brought that up. I'm getting better. I've been doing this for, I think probably a couple months now. And I thought, I had my grandkids I had a baby grand, which I didn't play much for a number of different reasons, but I want music. And I thought, 50 years ago, I played the flute. Well, I'm going to try that again. And I'm getting better. It didn't sound very good at all when I first started. I'm getting a little bit better, but I committed to playing 15 minutes a day to start with, at least 6 days a week, usually 7. But if I don't do it every day, that's okay. But that's what I'm committed to. And if I do 12 minutes one day, I say, I've got to get back on track with the 15 minutes. But I'm gradually making, some improvements, and I enjoy it. It's fun.
That's what I wanted to ask you, was
It's
just
fun.
Is it bringing you joy?
It's bringing me joy. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it. That's the check in the box.
That's a big check. It's something I
Yeah.
wanted to do. It's something
Yeah.
I can do. It's
Yeah.
not super time consuming, and it makes me happy.
I feel like it's those things, the things that feed you. And for each of us, they're different. And defining what they are, and then creating your plan or your vision, so that you have time and resources to do some of those things.
Yeah.
And I was so inspired by your book, because although there are aspects that, so I'm about to turn 55 at the end of this month. There are things I don't want to think about. I want to do what we talked about earlier. Oh, that won't happen to me. I've got really good, it's not going to happen. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, it is going to happen. And it's better to take the, Ruth Bader Ginsburg approach and decide how you're going to make a difference
Yeah.
yeah. And then it becomes exciting, because it's like, wow, what impact can I make? And as you've pointed out in the book, at this point in women's lives, once they're 50 and 50 plus, they're not responsible for children. Usually their children, usually a lot of the responsibilities they've already lived with and grown out of, and they can define, they have that freedom. And I think people forget they have freedom.
Yeah. It can be the best of worlds. It really can. And other women have told me that too, once they got past that. Oh, I'm not young anymore. Oh, thank goodness I'm not young anymore. You get to that point, you say, okay, what's next? What do I get to try? I'm not weighted down with all these responsibilities. Although I will say, if I can, this is just kind of a kind of a red flag for women when so you have less responsibilities, and say we're going back talking about the post-career living.
Yes.
Women have traditionally been the ones that care for everything and care for everybody. And what can happen for women who have all these great plans is to find all of a sudden everybody wants you to do everything. You want you to go be more of a traditional homemaker now, which is maybe not your plan, or be the full-time babysitter for somebody else, or whatever else. And so really recognizing what's important to you, and that might be part of it, but maybe not all of it, to be the full-time, babysitter for a family member or something, is to set boundaries, to really know what you want yourself. Because when women don't necessarily know what they want, other people will tell you and push you into what they want you to be for them.
Right. And that's so important. And again, as you've said, it's like, you have to have the conviction. You have to be passionate about the pursuit of your vision in order to, state your boundaries and hold those boundaries. Yeah. It's no, but at the same time, I was telling you how I was on a bike marathon, and there were so many women who were in their 60s and 70s who were just decked out in all of the bike gear, and you could tell that they were owning this sort of hobby, and it was fun. It was cool. And I've made it a habit to just identify women on the street of, the streets of New York, to just, which women are owning their power and which women are owning their power. But this, I think that you've really lit a fire under my, because I think it's the idea of being an armchair traveler versus actually getting in and doing something. And it's so easy for people to sort of sit back and they talk about it, but they don't take action. And you continue to take action. not just with this book, but I think you have another book coming and workshops that you're doing. But it's inspiring because it takes a lot of energy to fulfill, these kinds of commitments and promises.
Well, I think I have generally timelines, but not real firm timelines for some of my projects anyway. I know I'm working on certain things like my next book that you mentioned I've started. And that was, I'm learning a lot about being a widow. So I'm writing a book about my dearest husband, a widow's first year of loss, legacy, and resilience. I have been part of a group, and I ended up being a co-facilitator for another group of widows online. And I started realizing we all share a lot of the same things, and we go through some of these same things. In fact, if you happen to be married or in a partnership, in a heterosexual partnership, 75%, that was one of the stats I looked at, of widows or people who go through widowhood are female.
Yeah. Wow.
So the odds are likely, if you are a woman and you happen to be married, or in that kind of a relationship, you are going to end up in widowhood. And I thought, wow, this is not the way I wanted to learn about it, but I'm learning. I am learning. And I want to encourage other people and help other people feel empowered through that process as well. And we can help each other that way.
No, it's exciting. One of the points I meant to bring up earlier was just, we've discussed the importance of lifelong learning and embracing that as a mindset.
Yes.
And I feel like each of these topics that you're bringing up are a result of your attitude toward lifelong learning.
There's some really good research on that. And at first I was going to use the word empowerment in my next book I'm working on. I thought, no, resilience actually captures empowerment. And that's really what we need to feel is resilient. But a part of resilience is a desire to keep learning, because then no matter what we experience, we come back from it because, well, we say, I'm learning something. And that idea of growth, learning and growth are part of resilience. And being older and having life experience is part of resilience as well, of course, because we say, hey, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been through some tough times before, and I'm going to come back. And in that way, I think we can help other women as well.
No, this is exciting. Jeff, I'm curious if you have any questions for us.
Jeff.
Well, we do have one comment, not particularly a question, but Ruth Ann is writing an article currently due this week, and it's broadly about women's empowerment. And she said that this program is unbelievably timely.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. That's a fun topic.
Me too. One of the things that I really enjoyed about your book, and I've told you this, is the incredible amount of resources. And I feel like only a fellow researcher can appreciate, but it's chock full of relevant and Googleable websites, resources, whatever the topic. And I found that really, really helpful.
Good.
So whether it's financial planning or retirement planning or healthcare after 65, purpose, you have so many great examples. And I really love that about your book. I loved how everything you have, it's very actionable. You really provide steps. And I think we need that, because a lot of these topics are not fun topics. Like, we don't, who would choose financial planning or retirement planning over going out in the park? Very few people.
Yeah.
And so, but it's that kind of pull the Band-Aid off tough love stuff that your accountant would tell you to do. And I feel like no one gives us a book on the second half of our lives. And but this is a very good book for thinking about the second half of your life.
I want to just give a shout out to all the women who are willing to share their stories in that book as well. There's a lot of stories about real women's lives and what they're doing. And I probably over self-disclosed myself because I didn't shy away from telling you what some of the things that I did, wished I hadn't done, but then,
Paula, I'll have to tell you, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I was rereading something this morning, and I'm looking for it here, but it was something where you said, I started to feel ashamed that I was getting older.
Oh, yes.
And that grabbed me. And I was like, Paula felt ashamed. And I thought, I'm so glad she was so vulnerable and shared that, because it's real. And I think that, women can relate. If they're being honest with themselves, they can relate. And this is how we really can connect the message. And so I was grateful for all of your vulnerability.
Well, thank you. And foolishness as well.
No, you have to be human.
Oh, yeah. that I can own at this point in my life. I'm pretty imperfect, and everything I'm going to do is going to have that, but I want to keep moving forward and encouraging as many people as I can, to feel fully empowered and to live their best lives too.
No, it's exciting. It's really exciting. So Jeff, do you have anything for us? I know I've already asked you. No, just one.
Just had to unmute.
Okay.
Just needed a second to unmute. We received a question from Joanne. She's wondering if you had any thoughts on working with and around 20-somethings. This is an adjunct at a university who has noticed that as she ages, it becomes more difficult.
Well, I think that's a really important question, a great question, because where we can partner or learn from each other, I think that's really ideal. And there's really good research on, if you want to start breaking down stereotypes, people have got to work across generations, and a lot of times collaboratively. And I noticed when I was still teaching, and I didn't leave my workplace until I was 67. Some of my students would make little remarks, and like I wasn't getting it. But then when I would ask them questions or involve them, and it was a two-way learning opportunity, how do I fix this? What would you suggest on this? Then the dynamic changed a little bit too, and I had good opportunities to have really good, honest discussions. And I think that communication and sharing knowledge, and I have grandkids that are wizards with some stuff that I don't get. I go to them and I say, okay, how do I fix this? What do I do? So just tapping into their knowledge that they have, that they grew up with, maybe.
I just finished a course November and December, and the teachers were both 30.
Mm-hmm.
And the class was all millennials, with one person who was about 10 years younger than me. And I was just like, they're not going to be interested in this type of thing. Why would I mention it to them? But today I did, and they're all like, wow, this is very exciting. But I feel a little that isn't relevant, that they don't want to think about it. And yet they are interested. They are curious. Yeah. And I feel also like sometimes we can bump into some really wise Gen Zers.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We need each other.
We do. How do we start to break down, these stereotypes and create new narratives if we can't talk across generations?
We've got to talk across generations and respect that people bring different things to the table. Yeah.
I was going to bring up respect as well, because I feel like every generation does have a perspective, and they're all legitimate, and we need to be able to have that give and take.
Yeah.
And I think historically, you can imagine a narrative or a situation where the older person feels that they must be respected and that they're not going to respect, that there's this versus this. And I enjoy practicing that mutual respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot more fun.
It is. It is. Absolutely.
I
I
have
hope that
to
answered the
add,
question, or
yeah,
really was what she was asking about or talking about.
Jeff.
Okay.
What was the question?
Well, I was just doing a check-in. Was that what Joanne had asked about? Were we talking about, just that cross-generational communication was so important? And I think we were touching on what she was asking about.
Yeah, yes, she wrote, yes, thank you. And we had a 20-something on who recently graduated from Yale and is a Fulbright scholar working in Spain, who started a respect for our elders campaign. It was a letter writing campaign to break isolation for people in various assisted living facilities.
That is beautiful. Beautiful.
Wow. Fantastic. Fantastic.
There's a lot happening that we just need to recognize, I think, in terms of that intergenerational communication and efforts and support that is occurring. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you had questions about financial also. Did you already touch?
We didn't. And this is a big, I think Paula's book addresses a lot of these topics in depth, and we haven't gone in depth around healthcare or financial planning, retirement planning, but there's a lot in the book. Could you, I hate to ask you to summarize some of these, but maybe the financial planning, some highlights?
Okay, I will tell you, just for women, we can understand this. We were just probably a lot of us told, well, that's not really your area, or we were discouraged in taking courses that would help us feel confident about it. But we certainly can do a very good job of understanding it and have all the ability in the world to understand it. But we do have to pay attention. We can't keep our head in the sand with finances. Women are typically at a disadvantage because a lot of women will raise children, take time out of the workplace. So they're not building that nest egg. Their Social Security, assuming it's still there, will be less probably because of that. Divorces, widowhood, other things happen. Lower wages that women tend to earn over the period of a lifetime. All those things factor in once you're not working, what you're going to have left to deal with. And we've got to have a handle on that long before that occurs. When I was about 50, my son, who is a financial planner, basically said, Mom, you've got to get your together. He says, you need to have a plan. And so he had that, reversed parent talk with me, and I really started keeping track of everything I spent, started looking at what I needed to do. Couldn't have 2 wine clubs at the same time. Had to look at things I was doing and make quite a turn in terms of my future. So really getting a handle on where you are, what's realistic, what your plans are if you don't have the money you thought you were going to have. Again, wishful thinking is not a plan, and then working with somebody who can help, like a financial planner who can give you good, solid advice. I think that's it in a nutshell.
I think, though, if someone were to buy your book and to go through those chapters, it's fantastic. I mean, your chapter where you talk about how you and your husband built the playbook. Oh, wait, Paula, you're unmute, Paula.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay, I had to take the microphone off. I don't know how I got muted, but I did. But anyway, No, I didn't have anything to do with the playbook. That was my son's
Well,
business.
no, but you,
We worked through it. Yeah.
but you talk about it, and then you
Yes,
gave
yes.
a checklist.
Yes, we've used it. We had used it for planning, to be prepared, to have all our papers in order, to know what we were doing financially, to know what we were doing with estate planning.
Right.
And I think one of the examples I gave was when my husband had passed, everything I needed was in one single folder. Everything. I knew who to call. I knew what to do. I knew what my checklists were. I knew what our financial situation was. It was all in one single place. It takes a little effort, but boy, I'll tell you what, it was a lifesaver.
Do you have advice for women who need to do this, but just can't? It's just too much work.
Do
I
what?
mean, to begin to get their financial life in order.
Mhm.
I'm thinking, is it a coach? Is it an accountability partner? But people who need to deal with some of these challenging topics, but they're just having a hard time getting started.
Yeah. And I think that's, whether you start with, reading some books, and there's some really good ones out there written by women, for women.
Okay.
If you're in a position where you can work with a financial advisor, and I was lucky to have a son who's my financial advisor, that's really the ideal way to go, the best way to go, as long as you get a good one, somebody who has the right credentials, and that's a regulated industry. There are classes that you can take, and sometimes at a community college, where the tuition would be relatively reasonable. But we cannot afford, after 50, if you haven't already done it, not to take it very seriously. Because you think about it, your post-career lives, again, could last 20 or 30 years, and you want those to be your best years. You want to really enjoy them and have the freedom to enjoy them to the fullest. And for some, it might mean, okay, I'm going to have somebody live with me and pay rent, and that might be part of the plan, but you have to have the plan,
Right.
And I'm going to go back to work isn't always going to work out.
No,
but you may find, yeah.
So as I know we're getting near the end, but I wanted to ask, I've really enjoyed reading your monthly newsletter, and I'm just curious if there are some career shifts or some sort of examples of some of the things that women have done in their sort of later in life that have inspired you, or that would be inspiring. People who I feel like you have a friend who
real life.
There he is.
Sorry, real life is ringing here. Okay, that's my child. I have all my newsletters actually on my website, boomerbestyou.com. And so those would be easy just to go through. I've had friends, though, that have discovered their purpose after they left the workplace, or they discovered it later in life, whether they decided to write or do something else. But that's, yes, absolutely, that's available for anybody that wants to look through those. How are we doing on time? Are we?
Just 2 minutes left. We could get one quick minute in.
Okay.
I remember the woman who I think is a friend of yours, who I think she might be Korean American, and I think that she had sort of a shift in her attitude.
Yeah, she's the one that said that I love being older because I am no longer bound by gendered expectations and rules, and she got to explore who she was and what she wants to do. And she taught, she had a business, she's doing other things, but she's just she's another force of nature, and I think you would really enjoy her. But it is, if we develop the right attitude and we embrace our years and our opportunities fully, then these really can be some of our best years, and that's the power we really have.
Well, I'm inspired, and I feel certain our audience is as well. Jeff, thank you.
Thank you
And
both so
thank
much.
you.